Welcome back and thanks for joining us for the second half of our Europe Now show set in Belgium. Now, just over a year ago, 3 suicide bombers struck the international airport of Brussels, but also here at the Malbec metro station, just down the road from many of the European institutions. They left 32 dead. It was the worst terrorist atrocity the country has ever known. The scars of those attacks are still very much present here in Brussels. Let's go meet now some of the victims' families and the survivors too, amid complaints that the Belgian authorities aren't doing enough to help them.
A minute of silence in the departure hall at Brussels' Zaventem airport. The very spot where, more than 1 year ago, 2 bombs exploded, killing 16 people. Alongside the Belgian royal family, survivors of the attack, and family members of those who lost their lives.
Jennifer, Wetzman, Shinto.
One by one, their names are read out. Lars Wetzman was there on the day of the attack, March the 22nd, 2016. The blast killed his wife.
I asked myself, what if? What if we would have left 10 minutes later? What if we had driven a bit slower? What if? But it happened. In a split second, my world's changed.
Belgium has long been accused of being a hub for young jihadists and illegal arms. That day, it was hit by the worst terror attack in its modern history. 2 suicide bombers blew themselves up at the airport. They would later be followed by a 3rd bomber, who detonated his explosives at Malbec metro station. 32 people were killed and more than 300 injured. Philippe lost his sister in the attacks. He set up an NGO to help victims of the blasts untangle the web of administrative procedures to qualify for compensation.
Each time we have to clarify everyone's situation. Sometimes we get the impression that we have to practically beg just to get enough compensation to make ends meet.
The hurdles can be even tougher for the more than 70 victims of the attacks who aren't Belgian, like Nicolas de Lavalette, a Franco-American whose 18-year-old daughter was seriously injured at the airport. He's at loggerheads with his insurers because they still haven't compensated his daughter. He's had to move house to find a place that meets her needs.
I'd like to see in Belgium an organisation that takes care of everything the victim needs. That would avoid us pulling out our hair just to get information. Unfortunately, my life still hasn't returned to normal. Things will never be the same. I think that when you see your own family become victims, something inside you changes. But you have to get on with your life.
For some, last year's attacks left scars that will never fully heal. This emergency doctor was one of the first people on the scene in the aftermath of the blast at Malbec station.
There was hardly any light. All I could see was a red light flashing. There was no noise. Something else that stayed with me was when I got to the street where the bodies of the victims were being gathered. I remember the look on their faces. They were no longer with us. They were in another world. It's something that's stuck in my memory.
Under mounting pressure, the Belgian government has vowed to make it easier for victims to get their hands on compensation. It's proposed new legislation that would allow them to claim back medical fees. But the victims have yet to receive any of the new aid promised by the government.
We're joined now by Maria Arena, the Socialist MEP for the French-speaking area of Belgium and a member of the Socialist and the Democrat group in the European Parliament. And you've brought us here to Charleroi and one of the emblematic and cultural sites of the city of Charleroi. Let's take a look.
Vas-y, un keuf éducateur, bonjour madame et tout. Un flic de gauche alors, en quelque sorte. Exactement. T'es pas si con. Faut pas se fier aux apparences, cousin. J'ai l'œil, moi. Et pourquoi t'es passé d'éducateur à keuf? Je les connais, les éducs, ils aiment pas les keufs, normalement.
Parce que j'ai vu malheureusement que les bons sentiments ne suffisent pas pour ramener les brebis galeuses sur le droit chemin. Et que le temps de l'éducation est révolu. Le mal est allé trop loin. Faut plus rien laisser passer, rien.
Marie, vous êtes rencontrés, Grégory.
Bonjour. Enchanté.
It's a play that's really very topical nowadays. I was wondering how young people relate to the play.
I think it helps to raise questions, because you hear about things that you don't necessarily want to hear. That's to say, the point of view of the jihadists. And we see that we project some humanity onto them, even amidst all the horrible things.
If you're confronted with a shocking perspective, shocking arguments, things that you don't really want to hear, then it hits you. You say to yourself, oh yeah.
For the audience, you start to see, between the young guy who seems really cool but who has his dark side, and then there's the cop who in the end is really human too, it's a really fragile balance. That's what interests me in theater, how to create discussion. We try to open up a citizens' debate about an issue. These are the questions that are shaking Europe, that are shocking people. We're confronted with something that's bigger than us. Politicians don't have the answers, and nor does society.
The play that's currently in preparation here at the theatre is the La Route du Levant, the road to the Levant. It talks about a potential terrorist and a dialogue with a police officer. It's a very topical theme. Why is it important to use culture and to use the theatre to address these subjects?
Because it's not so easy to speak with young people about terrorism. And so with culture, you can have different messages. You can just see why these young people are going to fight with the Djihad. And you also see the relationship between a policeman and the young people. How is it difficult for them to work together to fight against terrorism? And with this message and with this theater, it's more easier to go to schools, to go with young people and to speak about something else. It's more difficult for me as a politician to go and to give a message. With culture, you can speak of everything without taboo.
Are you seeing an impact from this kind of approach of using culture in schools?
Yeah, of course, because we have had display Djihad. They were in all the schools here in Belgium, and the teachers were really keen on doing this because they have had a lot of questions coming from young people about terrorism. And I hope that with this one, it will be the same thing. Just to speak, just to not to keep it just in your mind and without having any question, any answer on what's happening for the moment in the different play of the world.
And then, looking at the situation here in Belgium, just over 1 year on from the attacks in Brussels itself, how have you seen Belgium and Belgian people, both from the north, from the Flemish-speaking areas, and from the French-speaking Wallonia area in the south, how have you seen the reaction in the country after those attacks?
The reaction was similar between the north and the south, just to say that we have to work together, but not only in Belgium, we have to work together in Europe to fight terrorism. But this is the situation after terrorism. The situation in Belgium between Flemish and French people is still difficult for the moment. And so terrorism is one thing, and economy or different political way of working together stay something very difficult for the Flemish part to work with the French part.
So do you still see a degree of rivalry there, that it's pushing towards the separatist movements that we've seen in the past? Do you still see that undercurrent present?
Yeah, because I think in the Flemish part it's more difficult to accept people coming from abroad. Here in the French part we have historically different migration situation. For example, I'm from Italy. You have here in Charleroi 50% of the people living here from a foreign identity. They are Italian people, and there is no problem being together. In the Flemish part, it is a community that is built on identity situation, and so it's sometimes more difficult there to accept people coming from abroad.
You mentioned there that play Djihad, which over the past 2 years has really proved to be very successful in dealing with the question of extremism and terrorism here in Belgium and further afield too. Now its author Ismail Saidi has released a second play, Gaen, which talks about another homegrown terrorist. We went to meet him.
Accusé, levez-vous. Non, ça va pas être possible. Accusé, restez assis.
1 year on from the Brussels attacks, grief has turned to creativity on stage. Gayen is the story of an Islamic terrorist who attacks a Jewish school and has to deal with his conscience in jail. But despite that, it's also a comedy. For the writer, director and lead actor Ismail Saidi, humour is a vital weapon in dealing with religious zealots.
It's my way of being a believer. It's my way of not letting crazy people speak instead of me. This guy was taught to hate. Right from his damn childhood, he learned to hate Jews, and he goes on to kill them. He's learned that he's right and everyone else is wrong. And it's important to underline this failure, this error, this horror.
The play takes its name from the biblical word for hell, reflecting the protagonist's own tortured psyche. Gayen is the second time Saidi dealt with terrorism. It follows the success of Djihad, a play about a trio of misguided Belgian extremists who head to the Middle East. The Belgian authorities promoted the play's taboo-busting message, and 2 years on, it's been seen by tens of thousands of people in Belgium, France and the Netherlands.
Ils ont fait quoi, eux?
Ouais, merde, ils ont fait quoi?
Mais pourquoi vous me regardez comme ça, les gars? Mais j'en sais rien, moi. C'est pas moi qui décide. Ce sont nos ennemis, c'est tout. Ah bon?
To ensure his message is not misinterpreted, Saidi holds a debate with the audience after the show.
Le changement, c'est que je pense à Dieu.
That's what Gayen talks about, this gulf that's created between people, talking about this hatred that's instilled in people. This is what art is for, to go where people don't want to go, to push where it hurts. For the moment, I don't think it hurts, but it does make people think, it bothers them.
They're very timely themes, and it helps us get a grip on what's happening around us.
There are no taboos, whereas at school, as soon as you talk about jihad, people straight away say, uh-oh, be quiet, it's Muslims. Here, he stops people mixing up the issue.
Ismail Saidi says his previous career as a police officer taught him nothing is black and white. But as a Belgian who's also a practicing Muslim, he's seen how discrimination in Europe has fueled extremism.
Europe failed in the way it considered an entire swathe of the population as being part of the whole. That's what I said in Djihad. We try to describe these people with a million words. Except European. That's the name we never gave them.
Gayen is only at the beginning of its journey. It premiered in Paris in April, and Ismail Saidi says a third, more optimistic play is in the works.
So we've stayed here in Charleroi, but we've very much changed the decor. We're in a Biopark research centre. Here in the French-speaking Wallonia area of Belgium, the unemployment is almost double that of the Flemish-speaking area in the north. What is behind that cause, and what can be done to remedy it?
This part of Belgium is what used to be an industrial one. And they were victim of globalization. We lost a lot of industry here in Charleroi. And so we need to have more investment in new technology. And it's why we have this kind of investment here for the life science. And we have, for example, 46 new companies that are here with more than 1,000 people working here. And it is the result of 20 years of investment here in Charleroi.
You mentioned there the investment, but it's the European Regional Development Fund has invested massively in this Biopark research centre. What kind of impact is that having on the region?
It's really important to have European investment, because without this money, it was not possible to have a private investment here because it was too risky. And now that we have this investment, we can have private funds to come here because the risk is less important now. So we have 250 million private funds coming here in Charleroi in the Biopark.
So we mentioned there some of the European investment. What kind of impact is that having for you and your colleagues here?
This facility was actually created with European and Walloon funds. So without this help from the European Union, the facility wouldn't exist and I would have to have another job.
Speaking of the European funds, what's the next step? Are we expecting more funds to be invested here?
We just received another grant from the European Regional Development Fund, which is about 20 million for the Biopark here, including 6 for my facility, let's say because I love it. So yeah, they are still engage in the further development of the site.
How do you respond to the fact that here in Belgium, not far from Brussels, the capital of Europe, people don't necessarily feel the benefits?
For example, when I speak about 46 companies that are here, without Europe, it was not possible for them to be here. But people don't know that. They say, oh, they are companies, they are private companies, and if they are there, it's just because they want to be there. No, in fact, they are there because 20 years ago, we decided with Europe to have this kind of investment. So we have to have more information giving to people, saying that that is the result of Europe. Europe is not only an administrative way of thinking or a technocrat thing. It's something that it is really concrete, but we have to explain it.
We hope you've enjoyed this look at the country at the heart of the European project, Belgium. That's all we've got time for this edition. Do tune in next month for the next edition of Europe Now.